Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast. Today I'm here with Roger Best, and he is with GenX Capital Group, a private equity firm. And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you today about who you are, why you're building what you're building, and kind of what you're up to, because you have an incredible background. At least I relate with it a lot. And I've talked to you a couple times already. So I look forward to this today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Cool. The coolest guy in private equity is kind of the name I'm going to give you. You kind of got this cool, relaxed demeanor, not your normal part. Like you think somebody's taken the bar, an attorney, all your background and stuff. You don't fit the standard profile of your personality is like really cool and laid back. So this is going to be a fun conversation. Let's start off with the standard, my joke, right? My standard joke is you were born and then you ended up on a show about mergers and acquisitions. How in the hell did you end up on this show?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You want me to start all the way back from being born, or where do you want me to pick
Yeah,
the story?
start where you feel comfortable. Probably start like when was your first entrepreneurial experience and kind of what got you into? I know you got mechanical engineering degrees, law degrees, and now you're in private equity. Kind of how did you? What's the road to get to where you're at now?
Sure, yeah. No, that's a great question, and a lot of times people see sort of the broad background that I have, and they have a hard time identifying exactly who I am, which it's I see that sort of as a compliment, and has actually suited me quite well for getting into the private equity world. But as you mentioned, I started out in engineering, not so much because I wanted to be an engineer, but because I was good at math and science, and didn't want to have to write essays and read novels in college. So I was like, engineering it is. So as time went on, when I graduated from engineering school, I continued down the engineering path because still really hadn't quite figured out what I wanted to do with myself. And I got a really great offer right out of engineering school. And so I took it and actually continued to be an engineer for mechanical engineering for about 9 years and worked for a lot of the big companies. I was with BP, I was with Honeywell, General Motors, and a couple of stints at some small consulting firms. But all the time not really satisfied. Felt like there was something more. And I realized that really pursuing something entrepreneurial was really my interest. And I stumbled across some information about real estate investing, and that really piqued my interest. And I would say, especially because of my background in engineering, some of the experiences that I had were really phenomenal. Frankly, as a young engineer, I was given an extraordinary amount of responsibility, particularly at BP, where I was doing construction management of industrial, refinery construction projects. I was managing large teams of engineers and construction crews and experts, multidisciplinary experts, everything from electrical engineers. I was mechanical, but I was managing electrical engineers, chemical engineers, construction foremen, you name it, a broad range of people with expertise, far older than I was. But it really taught me how to manage people, how to manage business processes, how to get things done, how to meet goals and objectives. I was responsible for budgets. I was responsible for schedules. I was also responsible for quality, safety, many things that were critically important to not only the project, but all the people who were on the project. And so, in addition to all of that, I also was part of my job was to make a business case to the higher ups in the corporation for funding the project. So, meaning that in order for the corporation to decide whether or not they're going to write a check for a certain installation project, the engineering and everything that goes into it, it had to make sense. They had to get a return on their investment in a certain period of time. It had to meet certain ROIs. So I was responsible for doing a lot of calculations in that regard, net present value and ROIs and things like that. All of which was a part of the training that I got in that role. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of that experience and knowledge was really valuable for me going forward. And as I started it really helped me to sort of get the right foundation for entrepreneurship. And so when I started to realize that real estate was one of the areas that I wanted to pursue the entrepreneurial urge, I really quickly started to see how my number crunching, deal analysis, business case preparation and analysis was very applicable. Furthermore, being able to manage teams and mobilize people, motivate them to meet budgets, schedules, and that sort of thing it was a perfect fit. And so I was really sold and hooked on real estate, and actually started doing real estate deals on the side while I was an engineer. And then ultimately, I ended up going to law school, not because I wanted to be a lawyer, but because I wanted to be a better entrepreneur. I wanted to figure out how to better structure deals, how to get involved with bringing investors in, partners, and really figuring out how to put together deals and in a way that would make sense and would be legally sound, financially sound, every aspect of it. And ultimately, that's what I ended up doing. I went to law school at night. I took all the business courses, real estate courses. I mean, most of law school is sort of required curriculum, but where there was an opportunity to take electives, I absorbed all of the real estate courses and business courses as I could. And from there, once I graduated from law school, I did practice law for several years initially. And at one point, I had my own law practice. At another point, I worked for other law firms, primarily doing real estate and corporate law. And ultimately, that led to an opportunity for me to actually to go in-house and work for a real estate development firm, initially as a lawyer and handling a lot of the acquisitions and sales transactions. But it also started to include structuring deals and some of the things that I had been doing for my own entrepreneurial endeavors. And I soon was recognized for my ability to crunch numbers. I was a whiz at Excel and being able to put together deals and business cases and analyzing investments and things like that. And before I knew it, I was being invited into sort of the executive boardroom, so to speak, with the deal makers, and really became part of the deal team. And from there, I was doing a lot of the business side work in addition to the legal work, and really wearing two hats, probably about 50% of the time in each role. And as time went on, there were other opportunities that came up where I ultimately had an opportunity to be a part owner in a real estate development company, and continued in my role both in the partly lawyer, partly deal maker and investment analyst for real estate and development projects. So that was really, to answer your question, long answer to a short question, that was really my start in the entrepreneurial space was really on the real estate side. And then it went from there.
I have a background in real estate. Were you guys doing primarily commercial construction or residential housing communities, or what were you guys building?
Yeah, we were doing a number of different things. We were doing some mixed use, commercial and residential. We got an opportunity to do some planned unit development deals, but this was during the time period where, at least in Chicago, where I lived, still live actually, there was a big boom in the early 2000s of condo development.
Mhm.
So we were in the condo development space, condo conversions, and that sort of thing. And then also redevelopment of residential housing as well.
So retail strip mall kind of thing at the bottom floor, and then condos above, like a.
Yeah, not so much the strip malls. We didn't do much in the way of retail.
Mhm.
It was mainly strictly condos, so like from the
Mm.
ground up
Yeah.
condos or condo conversion projects. But yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And then from there, you went straight from there into starting the private equity, or did you start working? Do you do some private equity work for as a lawyer? Or
Right, yeah. So from there, if you recall the early 2000s, right around 2007, there was the big real estate crash and the
hmm
whole economy, the global economic crisis and so forth. So because everything I had done up to that point had been in the real estate world, I was sort of facing a chance, what ultimately was an opportunity to really sort of reinvent myself and figure out what I was going to do with myself. The company that I was working for at the time ended up closing as a result of that. And by the way, ended up being still finishing up profitably. We didn't lose anything, so which was great because a lot of people lost a lot at that time. But we saw the writing on the wall about a year ahead of time and started liquidating.
hmm being able to see the writing on the wall is critical. But at the same time you were doing that, I started looking at it and like, what everybody's seeing that the market was crashing, and I seen, wait a second, these houses are all going on sale, right? So I started buying up bank-owned houses and doing negotiating short sales and being in that space. Mainly, I accidentally got into it, like kinda like you did. You ended up with a client that got you into the space, or I got acquired by one of my I had a real estate sorry, I had a marketing agency where we taught small business owners how to better market their stuff and get better leads and grow, and
Hmm.
one of my clients was a real estate investor, and the profit margin on real estate was investing was so big, I was like, "I could really suck at this and and make him a lot of money." So, it was like, "I don't have to be very good here," and it was like, and I'm decent, but it was one of those, "Wow, there's a lot of profit in real estate." So,
Hmm.
at some point, he bought me and brought me in-house,
Yeah,
and it didn't work. We kinda clashed. I was constantly trying to keep him on the straight and narrow. He's a little bit shady in the real estate world, and I was like,
yeah,
I just didn't wanna be involved with it. At some point, he turned that on me and tried to make me an employee when I owned a big chunk of his company,
yeah.
and wanted to pay me as employee, and at the point, he think he owed me probably 50, 60,000 bucks. I had enough of it, so,
Hmm. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but,
Okay.
it's one of those. I don't miss it because what I did in that space, I was constantly around the negative energy of it.
Mm.
Right, we negotiated short sales from banks, we bought bank-owned properties. Every house we touched, somebody it was a family that somebody got displaced from, and constantly involved with that. So, now I look for things that are a little more positive in the world.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And one of the things that when I was still working with a law firm, I spent a fair amount of time. Well, I'd say probably a year or so with another law firm where we were doing a lot of, I mean, literally thousands of bankruptcies for people who were, a lot of them were, caught in that shakeout with the crisis and the real estate meltdown, and they were losing properties left and right, and a lot of investors losing properties. So we were representing them in bankruptcies and foreclosures and short sales and you name it. A lot of the things you're
It
talking
wears
about.
on you though, doesn't it?
It does very much so. It was. I didn't like that either, and so
After nearly 10 years of it, I finally just said, "You know what? Maybe it's also I'm a bit of a natural born empath. If
mhm,
somebody's in front of me crying, I have to it's really hard for me not to. I feel the emotion. I can walk in a room and feel the emotion in a room,
yeah.
and, it's weird for a guy to do that. Like, I know this sounds like a feminine thing. Maybe I'm on that scale or something, but I don't wanna be around it anymore. I'd rather be around the positive energy and entrepreneurs and people making a difference in the world."
Yeah, right. So at that point, recognizing that I needed to sort of reinvent who Roger Best was in the wake of this real estate meltdown, I decided to sort of reapply or transfer my deal making skills to being a corporate lawyer and put down my business hat, my real estate, excuse me, my entrepreneurial and business hat, and decided to just be a lawyer for a while. And I ended up working for two big law firms in Chicago, not simultaneously, but first one, then another, over a period
Mm.
of about 10 years. And what was interesting was by being a corporate lawyer, I ended up really getting into this mergers and acquisition space. That was my entree into the space. Now
Mhm.
I had done corporate law before in the context of real estate, because oftentimes they are, you're buying companies or you're setting up companies, setting up entities to buy companies, and you're using entities for a variety of deal structures and so on and so forth. But this was really different because this was actually buying and selling of companies. And these major law firms that I was working for, the clientele was corporations, mid-sized to large corporations, in some case global corporations, and private equity firms. And so a lot of my work was with private equity firms. I was involved in setting up their investment funds and as well as doing the acquisitions and sales of the companies. And so and all the things involved with the diligence and so forth that lawyers do as a part of these deals. So I was really learning from the best in the industry. I mean, I was blown away to see the kind of money that was being made in these deals. I
Mhm.
mean, like a single transaction, they were walking away with a check for like $100 million. I mean, it was absolutely insane. And when I was starting to really understand what they were doing, I was really blown away. And I was there's an interesting statistic I could mention, and it was done by Forbes and recently, and it said that the 400 wealthiest people in the United States, 93% of them made their money in private investment funds, as compared with real estate, only 3%. And real estate has for years, for decades, has been touted as the best way to build wealth, and which I believe is true. I mean, I certainly believed in that and still believe in it in certain contexts. But in the last 25, 30 years or so, private investment funds blow real estate completely away. I mean, it's unreal.
I always say if you wanna make a few million, spend your life doing real estate. If you wanna get past that, this is the space to be in, right? You can spend your whole life in real estate. I spent 10 years and ended up with a decent portfolio, but it was 7 figures, not 8 figures, and I spent
Hmm.
10 years doing this and actively did the number of transactions that I did in the real estate world, or even some scale of that, stayed as active as I stayed, the number would be 10x that, right? It would be incredible
Yes.
to stay and do as many negotiations as I did inside of the real estate, like long 6 month, 12-month negotiations. We were doing 12, 18-month negotiations to buy a single house because they were short sales with banks. We're negotiating
Yeah.
with banks,
Yes.
negotiating with foreclosure attorneys, filing complaints on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, talking to attorneys all day long,
Yes.
whatever it took to get the deal
Yes.
done to make a check for 15 grand at the other end, right? You
Yes.
wouldn't touch a
Yep.
merger and acquisition deal if you thought you're gonna, work 8 months and get 15 grand.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, so needless to say, this I was sold. This was a turning point for me. It was an eye opener, and it was an absolute turning point. And I really went all in at this point. I had an opportunity to learn from the absolute best in the business of mergers and acquisitions, private equity, and I was their lawyer. One. I wasn't the only one,
Right.
obviously, but they hire these big firms for a reason. And so I took the opportunity to and decided that this is what my entrepreneurial future is going to be. This is the space right here. And in the process of going all in with absorbing everything I could from my clients and the firm, I also on the side, just like I did law school at night, I got an executive education in private equity M&A as well, just to fill in the gaps, And so that was sort of the beginning of the idea for starting a private equity firm.
How did it feel to be an entrepreneur at heart at a big firm watching that kind of money go back and forth? It had to be infuriating to some extent to go, "Oh," and to know that most of the people in the room are not nearly as intelligent as you are, right? You just know you got your engineering degree, so to walk in a I think it would drive me nuts to be in that spot, and I know in the real estate space it did, like, even when I was working for the other guy, to see all the money going forward and only getting a small piece of it and seeing all the mistakes he was making, it
Yes,
was just like, "Oh, I could do this better."
absolutely, absolutely.
I was gonna
Sorry, go
ask you,
ahead.
how did it feel? What was it like to? Because you were there for a few years, right? So that was an extra
I was in that space for about 10 years.
that's an
Yeah,
exercise of restraint for an
absolutely.
entrepreneur to sit there like, "I'm just building up my skills. This is impressive. Watch the money." At first, maybe there's a little bit of this, like, imposter syndrome, like, "Okay, they're doing something I haven't figured out yet," but at some point, you gotta go, "Wait a second. I've touched every angle of this, and they're not doing anything I couldn't do."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and buying a company is very similar to buying real estate. I mean, it's more complicated. There are more moving parts, obviously, but I think because of my strong
Mhm.
background in real estate, especially on a commercial level and development level, it was really easy to recognize the opportunity. and say, wait a minute, do you mean to tell me that this is what you guys are doing here and the kind of money that's being made? I actually thought it was a mistake at first. I thought the numbers, there's something I'm missing here. These numbers can't be right. And ultimately found out that they were absolutely right. It's a whole different thing. And it's interesting because everyone who wants to be an entrepreneur knows about real estate. Everyone's heard about real estate in terms of just the general public. But so few people know about mergers and acquisitions, buying companies, and that it's an opportunity that even exists, let alone it's something that, with the right resources, people can do.
So now I know you're an attorney, you passed the bar, you get all that. Do you actually go out and do all the securities license and stuff to actually write private placement memorandums? And I don't know what they even need, but like, do you do your own stuff there, and do you still bring in outside people to raise capital?
Yeah. I mean, I have done some
Mhm.
of that. I'm not crazy about it.
Okay.
It's not,
I imagine it's tedious.
it's tedious, it's boring, and I mean, no offense to the securities lawyers out there. I mean, they're great, super smart folks, and but it really sort of takes a certain personality type to really love that sort of
Hmm.
work. Most mergers and acquisitions lawyers will, if they have an opportunity to outsource that or bring in a co-counsel that just focuses on the securities work, that's what they'll do because it's a subspecialty of the business. And so yeah, I don't mess around with that at all.
So let's talk about your group now, the GenX Capital Group.
Yeah,
What is this thesis? What are you guys
sure.
looking to buy? What is your like? What's
Hmm.
the business plan behind it, or per se?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. I think at least everyone on this
Hmm.
call, is familiar with the what's going on with the silver
Hmm.
tsunami, all the retiring baby boomers, and just the huge wave of companies out there that are the lower market, under 10 million, under 20 million in enterprise value, that are profitable companies that they're facing just closing down by the owners because the owners want to retire. They don't have either that don't have a succession plan, or their kids don't want to take it over. They don't have someone to take over the business, and certainly they don't want to work until the day they die. So they're like, well, I've made millions of dollars, I've made plenty of money, and I just want to retire. And so they just liquidate it, shut it down, and that's it. Well, our target market is this lower market, the silver tsunami, and obviously the biggest buying market in this country is private equity firms, and they can't touch these deals. They're entirely too small. They've got way too much capital to deploy to even look at companies like this. So our investment thesis is, it's nothing new. I mean, it's there are other folks out there that have the same idea, and we really want to do this on a much bigger scale. So taking these small companies and rolling them up and consolidating them, making them into middle market companies that have the aggregated EBITDA and revenue to get the attention of the middle market, private equity firms, or even corporate buyers that these companies would appeal to. And of course, bringing in the necessary infrastructure and systems and things to actually make it sort of a best in class, well run and operated company that middle market buyers are accustomed to buying, as opposed to sort of these main street companies that oftentimes are done like a mom and pop operation.
So where are you guys at in the process now? Have you made acquisitions? Are you still raising funds, or where are you at in the timeline?
Yeah, so we launched this year, and once we started doing it, or once we started having conversations, it was sort of a natural progression. We started having conversations with other private investment funds, whether those were larger private equity firms, but really more so family offices, hedge funds, and so forth, and just folks in our network. My partners and we've been in this space for a while. We all know a lot of players in the market and started having meetings. And what was interesting is just about everybody that we talked to loved the concept of what we're doing. They love the idea that we are positioning ourselves as a private equity firm to target that lower market and for the sole purpose of creating middle market companies. And they get it. They know about the multiple arbitrage, which probably most of your listeners know what that means. You're buying at a lower multiple because they're small companies, EBITDA multiple, 2 or 3x, and then being able to exit at the middle market for a much higher multiple, 6, 8, 10, whatever it might be, and being able to realize that profit spread in the middle. So they get the idea. What they're concerned, I wouldn't even say concerned, but they also recognize that these smaller companies are oftentimes don't have the systems, like I mentioned. They don't have the systems, they don't have the infrastructure for it to be appealing to the middle market. And so that's one of the areas that we are really focusing on. A big part of what we're doing is to really implement a really professional infrastructure with systems and operating procedures and developing a playbook that the goal is that anybody could take that playbook, certainly keeping the end buyers in mind, that they could take this playbook and operate the playbook and still get the same results, so that it's not all in the owner's heads. And so this is something that was found to be very appealing, so much so that we had a hedge fund that said that let's see what you do with this, and we are prepared to write a check for $250 million to back your entire fund. But they said what they want to see is a sample, like a prototype of it with these smaller deals. And that was sort of the impetus behind the pilot project, which we will get to talk
Yeah.
about probably in a little bit.
And for that operating system or whatever, are you looking at any of the off-the-shelf stuff? Like there's EOS, I don't know if you've ever read the book and looked into the system called The Great Game of Business. There's some people out there who have decent business operating systems, and those two work hand in hand, actually. They actually work together quite often, the guys at EOS and the guys of The Great Game of Business. I've interviewed both the author of The Great Game of Business book, and I've interviewed the current CEO of the EOS group. And I think that the Great Game of Business guys are way more aware of EOS than EOS was of them. But, it's just the size and scale of things. But there's nothing to be
Sure.
said for the guys that wrote the book, Great Game of Business. Their founders have bought over 60 companies. Most of them were turnarounds in very, very tight profit margin industries, like remanufacturing used uh, tractor parts and stuff like that, where they bring them in, they fix them up and sell them again. You're talking
Okay.
industries that have
Okay.
less than a 6% profit margin, and what they do is they
Yeah.
teach the employees how to be a great employee-ran company with employee bonuses and structures. Teach all the management, definitely, and even some of the line employees how to read a balance sheet, how their day-to-day task impact that balance sheet, and give them some decision-making power as to how that works. And they've managed to turn around. Like I said, they've acquired 60 plus companies and are huge now. Are you guys
Yeah.
using any of that type of stuff, or is this like you've been in this space for a long time? I've read the bios on your website of your executives. You've got some rock stars there. That most of probably 6 or 8 people, but you've got
Right.
an all-star team in this space. It looks like you've got some really good people on your team. Are you using something off the shelf, or you're going to modify something like that, or?
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, no, we're not using an
Mhm.
off-the-shelf product like any of the ones you're talking about. We're not opposed to it. So, as you mentioned, the folks on our team have a lot of expertise in developing these sort of systems and processes and so forth. We've also got relationships with outside consulting firms that do that as well. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that if there are systems out there that can be used that are applicable to the companies that we're targeting, absolutely, we would take a look at that and see what aspects of those things would be suitable for what we're doing.
You guys probably
Absolutely.
have connections all the way into Deloitte and KPMG and all the big
Yeah.
guys out there, right? So
Yes. Yes.
it's like when you have the team you have and have the team has a history, then you can call upon those connections, those friends and stuff to do things that the rest of us mortals, just don't have that. There's something to be said for that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I still have, connections with my college friends, and some of them are better friends than others, but, we still keep in touch from time to time. And yeah, no, I think it's a great strategy for sure.
So let's talk about this acquisitions pilot project. What is that? What are you guys up to, man?
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. As I mentioned before, the hedge fund wants to see a sort of a prototype of what we're doing with these acquisitions and roll ups and so forth. And so we realized that, well, first of all, one of the things we realized is that because we haven't raised a fund separately like what most private equity funds do, in order to most quickly create this prototype, we realized that we need to use or take advantage of SBA financing, which has a cap of $5 million.
Hmm.
Now, it also has a cap on per individual. So this is $5 million per individual. So if you're trying to do a roll up, it's pretty hard to do a roll up if you're capped at $5 million, as GenX by ourselves. So we realized that most of the people who take advantage of acquiring companies using SBA financing are corporate types, middle managers, upper middle or upper level managers that have an entrepreneurial spirit or realize that they would rather own their own company rather than continue to work in corporate America, or entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs are who have been, maybe they've been in real estate, maybe they've been in other areas, and they happen to have come across the idea of this notion of buying companies. So what we realized is that we could create a program where we work with such individuals. Now, the ones that are already doing it, then that's fine. They've got that covered. But there are a lot of people out there. I know a lot of these people, actually, just in casual conversation, that are interested in buying a company. And the problem is that they have certain apprehensions. They're concerned about not having the cash. They're concerned about not having the expertise or the know-how. They're concerned about, the pitfalls and risks, not having the bandwidth. Maybe they don't have a team, or they don't have, in other words, they don't want to be alone in it and doing it, any number of things. And so what we realized is that we can put together a program that really solves all of those problems for them. And we can make it sort of a win-win where we can really provide one-on-one training, coaching, mentorship, and actually just literally handhold these prospective buyers, we call them participants, in the program in helping them to buy their first company. Now, and this would be with them using SBA financing to do the acquisition. So obviously they have to qualify for the SBA financing, which means they would need to have, like a decent credit score. I think it's like at least
Hmm.
650. Depends on the lender. Sometimes it's a little higher, but at least that. They need to have certain business experience, entrepreneurial or business experience, to show that they have the ability to run a company. And they need to have some liquidity. They're going to have at least 10% as part of their purchase price to buy a company. Now, so there's certain things that GenX comes in and provides. So first of all, we walk them through the whole SBA process. We have connections with SBA lenders, and we have a couple of the best in the industry. They're very fast, they're very good, and sometimes you hear about these SBA loan processes that take 3 months. I mean, I've heard as many as 4 months sometimes. Our guys are able to, in some cases, able to get these deals done in 30 days. They're really good. They're really good.
I was going to say one of the biggest problems of a lot of these acquisition entrepreneurs is kind of the title we give them here on this show. I think Walker Dybel says he coined that in his book. I've interviewed him a couple of times, so I'll give him credit for that. But the acquisition entrepreneurs, one of the things I find in the SBA realm is they don't have the support from guys like you. They go out, they find the company, and they negotiate it, and they take it to the SBA lender, and the SBA lender looks at the deal and goes, "Congratulations, you've negotiated something that can't be funded."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's something to be said about having a team that knows this process, knows what a good deal looks like, knows what a fundable deal looks like, and can
Mhm.
get you across that finish line, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we handle everything really, from helping them to identify a deal,
Mm.
whether or not it's a deal they should pursue, what the criteria should be, structuring the deal, negotiations, drafting the LOIs, and even
Mhm.
the purchase contracts, things like that. And then post acquisition, helping them manage the company. And we've got a lot of connections with getting a replacement CEO or COO for the outgoing seller who's no longer going to be
Mhm.
running a company. So those key players, whoever's leaving, has to be replaced, or at least their role needs to be replaced. And so we've got deep connections in the M&A space, the private equity space, for folks that in all the industries, I mean, you name it, whether it's engineering, whether it's whatever kind of company it is, manufacturing, real estate, whatever it might be, we've got people that can step in and actually take over running day-to-day operations. So we've got connections in that regard. And we do the ongoing work involved with, since this is a roll-up, doing a roll-up now. So this is the next phase of this. So there's the acquisition for the participant, but we're doing this with multiple participants. And so all the
Hmm.
companies that are being bought are going to be what the roll-up is. And so the really cool thing about this is each individual participant on their own, they're able to buy a company, but at some point, I mean, well, really at no point can they do a roll up because they're only buying one company. By definition, they can't do a roll
Unless
up.
they go out and buy 5 $1 million companies, which was not gonna accomplish what you're trying to do.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And $1 million companies are have their own issues. It's always better to buy a bigger, more sophisticated company that generally costs more for a whole bunch of reasons. But it's a whole different conversation. But anyway, so if we're acquiring it, say we've got 10 or 20 or 30 or whatever participants, then that's where we are rolling up their companies. And we, GenX, and our team, and the additional people that we bring in to manage these roll-ups, by the way, so it's not just the 6 or 7 of us. We've got other folks that are waiting in the wings to manage these roll-up projects and so forth. All of those projects that are involved in the merger integration and business process improvement and all the things that need to be done that we talked about, setting up the systems and the standard operating procedures and all the things to really create a best in class company for the middle market, and doing that roll up process, which takes about 2 years. Our
Mhm.
outlook is about 2 to 3 years to get to a point where we can actually start looking at end buyers to buy these companies, which is a part of what we do, is to orchestrate the sale, identifying the exit buyers and negotiating and orchestrating those deals and exiting the whole thing. So I should mention that we don't charge anything for doing this, by the way. Our piece is that we take a stake in each of the companies. And the most we can take is 19% because the SBA has a limit of 20%. But we also recognize that because many of these potential participants who would be a participant, but maybe they don't have the liquidity necessarily to be able to do the deal. We want to leave a little room in there I mean, we can provide some level of liquidity to sort of joint venture with these
Mhm.
participants who don't necessarily have all the money that they need. And if I hadn't mentioned this before, we're saying they need to have about 100 grand. We can
Mhm.
work with that, and we can structure sort of like internal sub JVs where we orchestrate a maybe 2 or 3 participants together that maybe don't have enough alone, that sort of thing. That's easy to do. We can do that. But for people who don't even have enough, we want to leave a little room in there for passive investors who may be interested in being involved with this, but they don't want to be a buyer, but they want to participate perhaps in the upside of being involved with this roll-up strategy. So we can take as little as 10% and leave some meat on the bone for cash investors to get involved as well.
Now does the SBA person, he's got all kinds of personal guarantees and everything else he's put in on this. What does he get from, other than the guidance and everything else, does he get to share in that uplift? Because you're only gonna own, and say 19% of it,
Yeah.
where if he did this on his own, it's gonna take him 5 years. He might be able to easily get to the first threshold, right? There's multiple
Hmm.
thresholds in this arbitrage game. So he
Hmm.
goes out and buys a $5 million, he caps out his loan, he buys a $5 million company, and let's just say he gets really lucky, to make my math easy. I don't like doing public math. He buys this thing at 2.5x, all right?
Hmm.
So, or 2x, just make the math even
Yeah.
simpler. He's got a company doing $2 million in revenue. He's just under that radar. He buys another two or three. He can get PE down to come down to say $4 million. And he has to wait until he's paid down that loan or comes up with another way to buy this next company because he just capped out his loan. It's possible. Those guys can get there. I'm talking to people right now that are on their seventh acquisition. They figured part of it out. That said, there's another level once you get past your $4 or $5 million mark, and now you get up to the $8 or $10 million mark, and you wake up the giants, the strategic acquirers, and the publicly traded companies. You
Hmm.
get $10 million in EBITDA. Now you get to play with the big boys.
Yes.
I don't see anybody doing SBA loans getting there, right?
Right.
It's just so much of a stretch to go out and if you're buying $10 million worth of EBITDA, even if you got them at 2x, you just spent $20 million. That's four. You got four partners that use their loan or something. I think you can help those guys get there and get to that top or upper tier, and they get a larger multiple on what they're selling.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, what we're doing is presumably, and this is just for sake of easy example, the idea is that each participant is just buying one company. So the participant, I mean, I guess they could if if it's a cheap enough company, but presumably, let's say that each one is buying one $5 million company or one $3 million company, something like that. The expectation is they're just buying one. And so we have 10, 20, 30 different participants. The roll up then is that we're rolling up as many of those companies as we can. Let's say we were able to roll together 10 companies or 15 or 20 companies. And now we've aggregated to the point where our revenues and EBITDA are definitely on the radar of the middle market. So that's the strategy there. So there's only one payoff of
Yep.
the SBA for each one of them, and that's when we exit to the middle market.
If I had to guess, I would say that the SBA loan version of these deals getting done are probably 75 to 80% of the deals getting done. But
Hmm.
I wanna open your eyes to the fact that you may be looking away from 25 to 30% of potential deals. So, I'll give you an example of something you might be familiar with because you have some real estate background. I know people right now that are funding their entire purchase price of complete companies by buying companies who are sitting on real estate and doing what's called a sell leaseback. So
Mm.
they buy the real estate at a premium as long as the business can afford their. Are you familiar with sell leasebacks?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So for the rest of you guys who are listening, basically you buy a business that has the real estate, you take the real estate and market it to like a REIT or a third party institutional investor who will then give you a premium based off of what they're trying to hit in their cap rate and the fact that your business can support that rent. There's a lot. It's kind of like the SBA. They have their own each investment, each REIT or an investment institutional investor that is doing these has their own criteria. They're going to look at the operator, they're going to look at the business, can it support the rent? But a lot of times they'll pay a premium. And I know right now people have not only just bought entire companies with the sell leaseback as being the entire sole way that they purchase it. Multi-million dollar companies, they've actually walked away with one of the last guys I interviewed walked away with $800,000 in cash at the closing table. He paid and played the owner off, bought the real estate, and got 800,000 to infuse back into the next purchase. So, are you excluding, or are you looking to say we only want to work with the SBA lenders because of a process they go through? Or are you saying, look, if you've got a deal and you want to participate in the roll up and you've got other ways to fund it, we'd still talk to you?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, no question, no question about it at all. That the SBA is really geared toward people who would otherwise not know how to get it done. But
Yeah.
if they have the ability to get it done a different way, and I mean, you raise an excellent point about the sale leaseback. And to be honest with you, I mean, I haven't seen deals where the real estate was that significant, as significant of a part of the deal that it could actually the purchase and leaseback would cover even the purchase price of the company as well. I mean, that would work all day long if we
I,
saw those deals. Where I have not been seeing them, but
I'm looking at one right now. It's kind of a joke. I stumbled across one. A bit of mine, right? He just posted up. A business that's the same guy that has a kid in Stanford. He's in a rental property here in California, and his landlord's getting divorced. And there's like I've got to move, and he's just got some inheritance and stuff. And he's
mhm.
like, should I pay cash for a house or should I? What I should I do? So what kind of cash are you sitting on? He goes, just a little over $1 million. I was like, dude, no, don't pay cash for a house. He's an entrepreneur. He's one of the best project managers I've ever seen. You can look at things and streamline them and make things happen and just make people get stuff done. I think he would
Yeah,
be an excellent CEO. I said, you got to look at the space of buying companies.
yeah,
If I was sitting on $1 million liquid cash that I was looking to deploy, it wouldn't be on another roof,
right.
right? I buy real estate all
Especially
the
if you're
time.
living in it.
Yeah, especially if you're living in it, right? I might buy some real estate because I've got a kind of I'm a real estate junkie. I kind of if I leave cash sitting in my account too long, I tend to buy one just because
Hmm.
I know how to deploy it and make it work. That said, I was jokingly threw something up at him and said, "Hey, here's something 30 miles from 20 miles from your house, doing $12 million in revenue, and started looking at it, and I was like, "Wait a second, the real estate under they're sitting on $7.5 million of appraised real estate, and they're
Mm,
only asking $7 million for the business." Now the
wow.
question is, at $12 million revenue, can they afford a 65,000? Most of these REITs want an 8 cap,
Yeah.
so can they afford a $60,000 monthly lease?
Yeah.
You know, if they're doing 15-20% profit margin, it's not going to hurt them at all. If they're doing a 5 to 10% profit margin, that could be detrimental.
Yeah.
So I'm still now. I just filled all those NDAs. Unfortunately, it's a broker deal, and the
Oh,
broker's
yeah.
a real estate broker,
Oh, wow.
not a
Okay.
business broker. So he sent me 41 pages of crap. I got
Okay.
pictures of the real estate. I got pictures of the square footage of the building. I got economic studies of the employment of the town nearby. I've got everything but what I need to decide whether or not this thing can do it. And he doesn't get back until Monday. So this might be one of them. And I'm friends with somebody who specializes in this. I've interviewed her.
Oh,
So she
okay.
does sells leasebacks, and she's got story after story where the seller pays for the business and walks away with cash.
Hmm.
So it's not as common. It's usually a piece of the deal. Like you're usually so this particular company's got $7.5 million worth of real estate. They're asking $7 million for the business. They've got $1.5 million worth of appraised equipment sitting there, which you could do sell
Sure.
lease back on equipment too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they've got a couple $1 million sitting in their accounts receivable, which you could do,
Hmm.
invoice factoring. So
Sure.
I'm 100% confident I won't need the SBA to fund this deal at all. Right? If it's a good business, if everything else panned out. Now that's a huge if. We look at 100 of these before all those other ifs work out. But,
Yes.
I'm positive that if they can float that rent, that we could buy this and potentially even walk away with money to buy a second and start to roll up in this industry. It is possible. I know it's being done. One of the guys that I, interviewed on the show, he bought a cabinet making company and walked away with 800,000. I
Hmm.
know another guy who basically paid 90% of the he did a 10% owner finance, and 90% of the funding he gave the seller was
Hmm.
from the real estate. So it's the deals are getting done out there. People with knowledge can get really creative in this, right? Both those operators are wanting to do roll-ups, but they might use SBA loans for their second deal, but they didn't need it for their first. So
Hmm.
now they can get two, but then they're gonna get stuck, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good point right there as well. I should probably mention this. The pilot project, it's not set up for sort of the no money out of pocket type deal. It's really the idea is that it's a more traditional type deal. There's got to be some cash in it, and we're just trying to just get it done. And I mean, obviously, there are many more deals to do if there's some cash in it rather
Mhm.
than doing a no money out of pocket deal, which because I've done deals like that, no money out of pocket in real estate. I haven't done it in buying
Well, they
companies.
get done, but like I said, you gotta look at 1,000 deals to get
Yeah,
one done,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's a
exactly.
numbers game, right?
Yep. Numbers.
Extremely motivated usually it's an extremely motivated seller. It's very
Mhm.
asset heavy, meaning they
Yes.
got a ton of assets that you can do
Yep.
all kinds of creative financing and structuring, and they have huge account receivables.
Yep.
There's a lot of things you can pull money out of and
Inventory. Mhm.
huge inventory, just,
Yeah.
things that you can finance and to make
Absolutely.
them bankable
Yep.
other than the SBA.
Yeah.
But it does happen.
Yeah.
That said, I just wanted to make sure the only reason I even brought all this up was, like, just to make sure that we're not excluding that group of people because there's a lot of our listeners, and that's what they're trying to do, and they're getting them done. I'm interviewing them, so
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I would say that the pilot project is sort of a standard scenario, but for folks that have alternative scenarios that they want to talk about, we're certainly open to talking about other ideas, other ways of getting deals done.
awesome. So, how does somebody learn more about this pilot program? It sounds really intriguing, and what's the process to kinda get a conversation started or learn about it, or you guys have content out there about it, or if somebody wanted to say, "I'd really like to learn more about this," what does that process look like?
Yeah. So a couple of things. There's a one page, actually, I think it's 2 pages, PDF that I can email it to them, or if you I don't know if Ron, if you have it already, that was submitted prior to, was a part of the material that I included in the, actually I emailed it actually, but I mentioned it in the intake form. Yeah, I can get that to you, or I can, anybody can email me directly or call me, and I can send them the initial information and a more detailed, there's actually an audio recording that sort of explains how this process works so that they can hear it again. So those two things in contacting me, and then we can have a phone conversation and talk about things in more detail.
Interesting. I think a lot of people will be intrigued by this. They'll want the help. To just think about if you have a team of seasoned M&A attorneys and deal originators and stuff on your team, that's extremely powerful. And the fact
Hmm.
that you guys are taking a minority stake for basically being an oversight, being a board pretty much for these guys should give them some sense of confidence in what they're
Yeah.
doing,
Yeah, and
right?
it's really more than just the board. It is really literally taking them, hand-holding them,
Mhm.
and walking them through the process. Where there's an initial 3-hour training just to sort of kind of get them up to speed to a certain minimum standard. But then
Mhm.
from there, it's all literally like personal coaching to get them through the process and walking them through the process and plugging them into our contacts in the industry, our people, my team, and there's always someone, literally, I mean, we would be doing the heavy lifting. They are really just sort of, they're in the driver's seat, but we're doing the
Mhm.
driving essentially. And, unless they want to do the driving, which is fine because it's also a learning process, we're open to them being a part of all steps along the way, phone calls, negotiations, all of that. But for some people, if they're busy in their 9 to 5 and they can only devote a couple hours a week, they may not want to be that involved. And that's okay too.
Oh, it's like we're good on time. I'm gonna finish the conversation, so
Okay.
Mariel can either edit this out or leave it in there. This is raw and organic, but
Yeah.
I just didn't wanna run too far over. I don't ever stop a conversation if I don't have to when
Okay.
we're in the middle of something good.
Yeah.
So, I'm intrigued by this myself. I know some people already I'd like to send your way and to have those conversations, and I like the fact that you're building this out so that you can play a bigger game. Phase 2 of this is you have that funding from the hedge fund or you have that funding from other institutional backers, and now you can expand this at a much more rapid rate, right? You
Absolutely.
can, you know, you get an entrepreneur who comes in and he's got his first heat and air or whatever, pick a company, a plumbing company, and he's looked at a second one. You guys can execute on that so much faster having that back capital than
Yes.
waiting 60 and 90 days. There's some deals that get lost because the owner is either extremely motivated, sick, or something, and it needs to happen fast.
Yep.
And the fact that you guys could have SBA loan guys and get it done in 30 days, I don't know anything. I don't think you can get due diligence done and do everything you need to do in less than that. So you're kind of at the
Yep.
minimum time window anyway.
Yeah.
But I know in the real estate world, I rarely use my own capital to buy real estate. I'd like to treat my investors kindly and always include them in all my deals. And
Hmm.
the real reason is I had cash sitting in our account. So if something came up and I needed to buy it that day, we
Hmm.
could. And we bought not quite a few. We bought a few houses where I used to train all the local closing companies. If you got a good deal on your table
Hmm.
and you know it's a good deal and it seems like it's a good deal, and some reason, and it happens all the time, the buyer backs out or fails to close,
Yeah.
call me. I'll bring the money to the table that day.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times I'll wire the money to your escrow. I'll go do my stuff and I'll show up 3 hours later to sign the paperwork.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we got deals because they had hard money lending that backed out at the last second and the deal bust. Right. And like, I'll come to the table and close it. So you'll have that ability with that, with that pull to where somebody's got an excellent business. The last second the SBA pulls the plug on them. You know what? Let's deploy a little bit of capital here. Let's go ahead and
Mhm.
do this deal,
Yeah.
and we'll figure out how to refinance it or free that cash back up
Yeah.
within the first 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Brilliant. Brilliant stuff. If somebody's listening to the show right now and they're thinking about this, and what are the key things you're looking for in that operator? It's got to be more than just I got a down payment and I got a credit score. Are there some personalities, some like for me, I'm prior military. I love prior military. Funny thing is, I like gamers. There's actually scientific proof that people who play a lot of games are good at seeing systems and processes and figuring out how to work within them and how to find the cheat codes and make things work.
Hmm.
It wires the brain differently. Until I read some of it, I would have told you I don't want a gamer. Like, don't bring me a gamer as an operator. But it's really coming out to find out that these guys are really good at solving. Like, they'll look at an industry, look at the standard quo and go, "Why don't we do it this way?" And you're like, and it's just smart. They can find the cheat codes and things. But
Interesting.
prior military guys, big fan because I know they know how to run systems and operating
Hmm.
procedures. Like, they know how to do the same thing over and over again. They know how to lead and follow. It depends
Hmm.
on where they made it inside. For people who have, I would say, I'm a prior martial arts guy, so people have black belts in different styles, but not your standard taekwondo or any type of belt factory type of place. But like, if you get a black belt in jujitsu or judo or some rare form that I know takes 6 or 7 years, I have a lot of respect for those guys and understand that they have the perseverance and the
Yes.
fortitude, the tenacity it takes to be a leader. So those are the kind of people I look for. What is it you look for in a human being when they come to the table? Or is there just something that you guys have like kind of a selection criteria?
Yeah, one of the things that, so being that I'm an engineer and I've spent a lot of time around engineers, I like engineers for their ability to think and solve problems. There are some engineer types that are probably not ideal. They're better as to execute tasks and so on and so forth, but they're not really big picture thinkers. So what would resonate to me is folks that have been, let's say they're working a 9 to 5, they're corporate type, but they're in middle management, upper management. They've done let's say they're an engineer, but they've done project management. They maybe even have an MBA. Not necessary, but things like that show that they have some of the skills, or at least the education, and ideally the practical application in their work for leading teams, leading projects. Like you said, if they have P&L responsibilities, that's obviously a huge plus. And just seeing the type of projects that they've led. If you've got an engineer that sort of shifting a little different direction, let's say that they are in a manufacturing type of environment, there's a lot to be said for engineers that are responsible for entire production lines and turnarounds of production lines or retoolings and major projects. One of the things is not really manufacturing per se, but it's similar in that when I was working in the refineries, we would have these turnaround projects, and that's where they shut down the refinery for anywhere from several days to could be 2 or 3 weeks. But I mean, they're losing tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a day that they're not in operation. And so it is a big sort of project to get ready for the shutdown and then to execute the shutdown, meet all your targets time wise, budget wise, and get back online when expected. Well, similar things happen in manufacturing environments as well. And so people who have worked in that sort of environment, whether they're an engineer or not, I mean, they're typically you find engineers in those spaces, but you can, I know of some MBA types, project management types that are in those environments, and I have a lot of really solid experience in leading those types of projects and
Yeah.
programs, program operators in other situations where they're rolling out a new project or something like that. Again, non engineering scenario. Any of those sort of profiles would be good.
I was in that space for years and years before I got out of the tech world. So that's a different mindset. I love that you look for that too, because that's kind of what you have to do as a CEO or business running entrepreneur. I'll give you one area that I think is kind of cool that I think I would back, and I might as I build this out and I have more money to back other people. Right now, I'm just doing my own thing, but
Hmm.
as I have money, or if I ever raise a fund where I can actually back other people, I would back entrepreneurs who have made it for 3 or 4 years, and maybe they just don't have they have the tenacity, they've been making it work. They may or may not have succeeded in the first round, but
Hmm.
they had the tenacity to get through it, and a lot of times there's so many moving parts to start a company that
Hmm.
doesn't exist when to operate something that already has, like, so,
Yes.
for instance, if somebody has something and they've been cranking it out for, say, 4 or 5 years, and they have to sell it, shut it down, or whatever, because it never achieved product market fit, but I can see they made sales, they made improvements, they had good team members, people liked working for them, all
Hmm.
the other elements. That's a guy you can take and plop into something that's doing really well, where he doesn't have to be the 0 to a million guy,
Yeah.
and, it's a different personality. The
Yeah.
0 to a million guy is a different guy than, or even 0 to 500,000 guy is a different guy than the guy that takes something from a million to 5,
Yes.
right? And there's a lot of entrepreneurs who think that they have to start something, they have to create something on their own. And if you
Hmm.
just took those same skill sets and the same energy level of these guys, especially the youthful ones in their 20s, and they got their MBA and they go out and they start something and they chug along for 5 years and they're bootstrapping it. They're not funded, but they're making sales or getting stuff done. You take that same level of work and put them in something that's already, say, doing 500 to a million or maybe more, million plus dollars in EBITDA. So that's who I would be hunting. I would be hunting down people who failed for no fault of their own, besides the fact that it takes 10 tries to find something that has a perfect product market fit,
That's true.
right?
That's true. Yeah,
So
and you just made me think of a couple of other profile types. Someone who is like a strong business development type person, whether that's through sales or marketing or just the ability to be a visionary and
mm,
identify opportunities in the market to grow their division or to grow their top line or their bottom line. Those type of people, definitely interested in those types. And then the other would be supply chain type people, logistics and supply chain folks. They are excellent, oftentimes excellent problem solvers. And I'm not talking about someone who's just got like sort of a singular sliver of a role. I'm talking about somebody who is sort of responsible for an entire supply chain and even, on some level distribution as well. Those are folks that are in that space, especially on the supply chain side, because you can really be in hot water if you have problems go wrong on that end of the deal.
well, I wanna thank you for being here, man. I know I've used a lot of your time, and I wanna respect that, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. I like what you're building, and I wanna see you succeed. So I'll say this, I usually say this off the air to everybody, but if you ever see anybody I'm connected to, or you see somebody I interview and you're like, "Man, I'd really like to meet that guy." I like who you are, I like what you're up to, I like the team you built. I would be happy to connect you to anybody that you see that I'm working with or talking to or interviewing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and thanks for having me on as well.
Hang out for just a few seconds after the show, and we'll call that a show. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.